Good morning, everyone. I can see people are trickling in slowly.
Good
Fatima,
morning, John.
Maragesi,
Morning,
how are
John.
you?
Fine.
Morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Yes.
How is Dar es Salaam?
We are doing well.
Okay.
I was asking that I was another training for women in Durban. Is it still at the same dates in October?
Yes, it's in October, end of October.
Okay, I'll give some of our colleagues who are also assisting us to approve the loans on the women's sector.
Okay.
And perhaps after getting the internal approvals, she'll just communicate to you so that she can join the forum in Durban.
In Durban. Great.
Yes.
Great. Please do quickly because it's filling up very
yeah,
fast.
We will make it this week.
Okay.
And once concluded, maybe by early days of next week, we'll communicate and fill those forms for registration.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I think that is fine. Thank you. Yes, and the rest do not want to show their faces, eh? Martin, how are you? How are you, Mr. Martin Yaga? I can see you're on mute, but you look okay.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Great, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Oscar. Wow, Oscar, how are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
Good. Are you joining us from the sea? You know you're a sea person.
Yes, it's sunny, tropical climate here, and we are enjoying it.
Good.
Yeah, greetings from North Coast.
Great. I miss the coast. I can't wait for the holidays to come and
welcome back, sir.
I bring my family down there. Yes, I see some people are coming in slowly. We are about to start. We don't want to keep you long because I know you have quite a lot going on. Mohammed, Almas, how are you?
Hey, John, I'm fine, thank you. How have you been?
I've been good. How is Malindi?
Malindi is great.
Okay.
How about where you are?
We are okay. We are okay here in Nairobi. At least we are starting to enjoy the sunshine. The cold has been really hard on us, but I'm glad that it's opening up. It's getting a bit sunny and warm. You know, more like what you're used to in the coast.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Steve, how are you? Steve, I know you're also in the other side of Kenya. Steve Otieno, I see Rosaline. Oh, Rosaline. Good to see you again.
Hi, John.
How are you?
I'm here. I'm struggling with the Brian on the background setup.
Technology.
Yeah, so I'm around. Let me just clear with him.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, technology is a challenge, you know, for some of us.
Fine.
My friend was joking with me that we do face, you know, tech issues sometimes, but when it comes to money, like anything to do with M-Pesa and all that, we are really on top of that game. It's very hard to, we always find our way through M-Pesa and all these money platforms. But when it comes to other things, we struggle. So I see you're still struggling. I hope you'll get the background that we want. So what do you suggest? Should we start? I'm seeing we are 14 of us. I know there are others who are still joining. My good friends from Nigeria told me to give them a minute. They're still trying to evade the traffic heading to the office. They were complaining that it's too early for them, but they'll be joining us shortly. Huh? Thomas, have you managed also to connect with the tech?
Yeah, I am on here.
Good, good.
You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Good.
I think maybe so that we start and in in the interest of time, let us quickly just start with the opening session. So let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For those who haven't said hello, good morning. You can just use your hand feature on your Zoom so that I know you're there and you're listening in. I don't want people to be logging into the meeting and you're drinking tea and doing other things. So just raise your hand feature on the Zoom, just so that we know you're there and you're joining us from wherever you are. Nevertheless, I hope you're all doing well. So thank you so much for joining us during this webinar. The webinar is called Cafi-Ssf Network Event. I know some of you are wondering, what is this Cafi-Ssf? So there are some of you here who I know are very familiar with the term. So you have a good idea of why you're here. The rest of you, don't worry, everything will be clear by the end of this webinar. To start us off, I'll call the Secretary General, Mr. Thomas Essel, to please to make some opening remarks so that we can start the webinar. Thomas, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, John, for giving me the chance to give few opening remarks for this program. As you have said already, we are undertaking this webinar in the context of the work that we have done in small-scale fisheries in Kenya and elsewhere, and also in the context of the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, what is popularly called IAFA 2022. I'm not aware if government officials are here, but if they are here, protocol demands they be mentioned. We expecting also officials from FAO Rome, and then we are sure we have our own financial institutions and insurance companies firmly represented. We have key holders in the fisheries sectors, and we have ladies and gentlemen who have gathered to make this webinar a really engaging one. I want to start by saying good morning to you, wherever you are, whether in Kenya or any part in Africa or in Rome or elsewhere. I learned some of them were even at the beach trying to connect. It is a pleasure to once again get all of you on the platform to renew our collaboration in promoting fisheries work in Kenya and the rest of Africa and perhaps the rest of the world. On behalf of Africa and FAO, I express a special welcome to you all. The purpose of this webinar is to update you who have been part of the study we have done on small-scale fisheries in Kenya, which has involved a baseline study of financing of the fisheries and aquaculture sector, the validation of the findings at another opportunity, and then later some training workshop also to build capacity in financial institutions to be able to work effectively in the sector. I know there are other places of work which emerged later, which will come up in the course of this webinar. And these will include work in semi-industrial fishery areas and then women fish traders. Ultimately, we want to draw your attention to the small-scale fisheries sector in the world this year as we celebrate the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, IAFA. Let me begin by saying that in 2017, the General Assembly of the United Nations proclaimed 2022 as the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. Since then, the FAO, in collaboration with other bodies of the United Nations system and other relevant organizations, including those of us in Africa and those of you who are joining, to draw attention to opportunities in the small-scale fisheries sector. IAFA 2022, as it is called, is therefore an opportunity to celebrate the diversity of small-scale artisanal fisheries and aquaculture, including women and youth, in relation to securing food security and nutrition, poverty eradication, and sustainable use of natural resources. During the launch of the International Year in 2021, which coincided with the World Fisheries Day, the world's attention was brought to the work of small-scale artisanal fishers, fish farmers, fish workers, governments, and other key partners along the fisheries value chain, highlighting related innovation and opportunities that could be exploited to build and strengthen support and partnerships at all levels. An example is what we are doing during this webinar. It is our turn now to proclaim and declare 2022 the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. FAO has already taken the lead, and that is why they have supported Africa to do some work in small-scale fisheries with support of some of you in Kenya. As we go through this webinar, the core issues that we will bring ourselves to address include defining the core activities of this platform, which we call the Cafi-Ssf Kenya chapter. And as John alluded to Cafi-Ssf, Cafi-Ssf comes from a word which originates from French or Spanish that connotes the promoting of global network for capacity building to increase access of small-scale fishers to financial services. So the whole thing is to promote the financing of small-scale fishers, which engage a lot of our peoples in Africa and elsewhere. So we are going to define the core activities for this platform that we have created. So going forward, we will be led through some of the activities and you will share your opinion. We will also ratify the establishment of Africa as the secretariat of this platform with support of our core team members. So in effect, they will be planning the agenda and the activities that will go on this platform. But the general activities will be decided by all of us during this meeting. And then we will also discuss how to keep our members on this platform. We are always increasing our numbers. How do we make them happy? What kind of things do we have to engage ourselves in to keep members on this platform so that we can grow and expand? As it is, we have started in Kenya, but International Year of Fisheries means we should proclaim it and expand it to other areas in Africa. What should we do on this platform to achieve that objective? And then finally, we'll come out with a 2-year program, perhaps planned in quarters, what we will want to do on this program to push the frontiers of financing small scale, to create more jobs, create more incomes, and reduce the challenges that we have with food security. As I conclude on my welcome remarks, I will say that this meeting should be a catalyst for us to be part of a larger body promoting small-scale fisheries at where we are. On this note, I will once again welcome you to this webinar and wish you fruitful deliberations which will enrich our knowledge and spur us on to support efforts by the FAO, governments, including the government of Kenya, development partners, private sector, financial institutions, and everybody at growing the small-scale fisheries sector in Africa. I thank you for your attention. I wish you well during this meeting. Thank you very much for hearing. Thanks. John, over to you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for those wonderful opening remarks. I think you've set the stage for this webinar to proceed. I would like to acknowledge a few people who have joined us as well. Lixia, welcome. Lixia from Rome. I see George Muruka. George, karibu. I see Mr. O. And I also see Ignatius. Please feel welcome. We are just starting. So our agenda today is not a long one. I promised we will not keep you for long, but there's still quite a lot to be covered. So we'll try and be brief and concise in our presentations. I would like to open my presentation. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, I think this is it. I hope you can all see my screen. Can you all see my screen?
It came, but it is gone.
Oh. Can you see that?
Yes, we can see.
Good. I wanted to talk about IAFA, but the SG did a great job in explaining what IAFA is all about. This logo has been there. It's featured in some of our publications with FAO. Some of you may have seen it somewhere, but you probably didn't know what it's all about. So I'm happy that the SG has demystified this logo. This year is actually the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture, 2022. I wonder when the next IAFA will be, Lixia. You know, Lixia, you're closer to your global partners, the UN. So you'll tell us when the next IAFA would be. But yeah, this year we are supposed to be celebrating the artisanal fisher. And I think the SG also made a good brief about IAFA and how it came about. It was actually a result of the UN General Assembly. They are the ones who declared IAFA, 2022. And FAO has been one of the implementing partners. So we've become part of that implementation in regards to creating awareness, because that is the objective of IAFA. It's actually to enhance global awareness and understanding and actions to support contribution and sustainable development of small-scale artisanal fisheries and aquaculture to food security, nutrition, poverty. And also the other objective is to promote dialogue and collaboration. And I think through this project, the MDF, we have tried to do that a number of times. I'm glad that, even some of the participants who are here, you can attest that it's probably the first time some of you fishers have interacted with financial service providers, which is great. And I think that is where we need to start. We need to foster that dialogue, so that people or both groups can understand the needs and expectations of the other for the betterment of the fisheries sector. About the MDF project, and I think Thomas also made a brief about MDF and what it's all about. So this is a project that we started with FAO last year. I think it was April last year. That's when we started in earnest. The project apparently is being parallelly implemented in Thailand as well. We were expecting to get someone from there, but unfortunately they didn't make it. But yeah, so it was being implemented in Kenya and Thailand. And some of the key activities are highlighted in the slide. We were to do a stakeholder survey among financial service providers, fisher folk, just to assess, how is the financial flow in the sector. After that survey, we did a stakeholder workshop in Tuapa, in Mombasa. For those of you who were there, I think that is where the so-called Cafi-Ssf was born. And that's why when I started my talk this morning, I said there's some of you who are aware about what Cafi-Ssf is all about. Some of you don't, but you'll get to, you'll get the clarity as we end the webinar. So that is where it was born. But Cafi-Ssf has been there before. It's actually a global network which is hosted in FAO. So FAO reached out to us to see the feasibility of starting another Cafi-Ssf network in the region. So that meeting in Tuapa was I can say it was very pivotal. We can all be proud that that is where that idea was born and nurtured. And probably that's the reason or major reasons why we are here today. Another key output of MDF was development of training materials. As we proceeded with the project, we realized that there was a major knowledge gap, from both the financial sector and also the fisheries sector on
We have lost John. Eh?
Hi, John. Unmute yourself, John.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost you for a while there. We had the internet is not behaving for some reason today. I hope it does behave from now onwards. Let me try and reconnect and share my screen again. Okay. So I was talking about the MDF, giving a summary. Yes, I was just on the point number 7, where we realized during the study that women play a very critical role in the fisheries value chain. And hence, jointly with FAO, we decided, why don't we have a much more in-depth study on the role of the female fish traders along the fish value chain. In Kenya here, we call them mama karangas. I don't know what you call them in your countries. Maregesi, what do you call them in Tanzania? What do you call the female fish traders? For us here, it's mama karanga, mama karanga. Everyone will know what you're talking about. Nigeria? Okay, no one wants to share. Right, so yeah, we decided to do a deep dive on the female fish traders. We got to study how they're structured and how they, they operate, in regards to their fish trading businesses, which I will share a few insights from that study. I don't want to go into the key facts and figures of fisheries, but I think we can all say that fisheries plays a very critical role in our economy. Globally, it actually employs 200 million, or approximately 200 million people. 59.6 million are directly employed in fisheries and aquaculture. Women, the ones who I was just talking about, account for more than 14% of all people directly engaged in fisheries. So it does employ quite a significant number of people. In Kenya, fisheries contributes about 0.5% of the national GDP, about 2% of national export earnings. I know people will bash me about these numbers. The ones who have been in the sector, like Steve, you know very well these numbers are not very good, right? And Maregesi, I remember one day you were lamenting that the Chinese have invaded our fisheries sector. Nowadays, you eat fish, you don't know whether it is from the lake or sea or from China. you eat with faith. So it's a big issue, I know, but nevertheless, we still have to find ways of promoting our local fisheries sector. Again, a little bit more about fishing in Kenya. I think it's structured like the other countries. In Kenya, we do have what you call the deep sea, the exclusive economic zones. That's where those big trawlers go to fish. Unfortunately, there are not so many local trawlers in Kenya. Majority of those trawlers are actually foreign owned. Again, this is a big concern, a big challenge. And that is why we need to support our artisanal fishers. So this is how the value chain looks like. You know, in finance, we like talking about the value chain. How does this value chain look like? You know, how does it flow? where can we come in as financiers? Something maybe I should try and mention is that when we were implementing this project, we had a very, I can say, focused financial perspective. I think all of us here at the Secretariat, we deal with you bankers mostly. So we had to wear a financial hat and look at this sector. Yes, we were learning a lot, but we were looking at it and saying, okay, this sector, is it viable for investment? Can I finance this sector? And we also kept comparing it with the agricultural sector. Those are some of the things which were going through our minds when we were studying about, artisanal fishes. So this is just a brief illustration of how, the artisanal fisheries sector is structured here in Kenya. And I think it's almost common across the other countries. One thing I know which is not mentioned very clearly is aquaculture. When you talk of aquaculture, then this chain becomes a little bit shorter because it's aquaculture, and then after that is straight to the market. But when you talk about capture fisheries, the sea and the lake, the chain is a little bit longer. You have the input suppliers, you have, the fisher folk who go into the sea to capture the fish. They bring it to a certain point called the landing site. And then there always a flurry of activity around the trading, segment, where you have a lot of middlemen, agents, boat owners, mama karangas we were talking about, trying to get the fish that has just been captured and to sell it, to the local communities, and probably even some to the hotels, some for export. So that is how, our fishery sector, especially the marine sector, is structured. But the aquaculture sector, like I said, is a little bit shorter. In marine, we have another small sector called mariculture, which is similar to aquaculture because fish is somehow, produced in a controlled environment. So it's similar to aquaculture, but it has different, different conditions to it. And I know most of the financiers who are here, you like the aquaculture sector more because, it's easy to monitor, you can easily finance some of the things that the producers want to buy, So again, these are some of the things that, make it a little bit intriguing. And like I said, it's something that we have been thinking, all along as we were implementing this project, trying to compare fisheries and agriculture. On one side we are thinking, okay, fisheries, yeah, at least for agriculture, there's collateral, there's land. But fisheries, where's the collateral here? And the study started looking at things like, for instance, the vessels and the gears. We try to see, can these assets, be used as collateral? In agriculture, again, you'll always find the producers are well organized, cooperatives, farm organizations. But in fisher folk, it's still a little bit disorganized. You don't get that, structured organization like what you see in agriculture. These are some of the issues that we saw, and we're trying to compare, and also trying to find solutions, to them. The technical knowledge about the sector. That is something like I think I earlier mentioned that there's what is it information asymmetry, or the knowledge gap is really wide. When we were talking to the financial sector players, they told us, John, of course, you show us where the money is, we will go. We don't fear financing the sector, but how do we finance it? So we realized there was a big gap in terms of knowledge, the technical knowledge, that is required to understand the sector and invest in it, sustainably. Mobile community, most of my colleagues in the financial sector, they'll tell you, the fishers they're very mobile and slippery. One day they're here, the next day they're elsewhere. So it's very hard to monitor them, compared to the agricultural sector, where you'll always find someone in his piece of land, doing their farming. And then again, there's also the uncertainty in terms of fish stocks. You know, I think the last few months we went to the coast, you know, we were told that this is the low season, so you won't get a lot of fish right now. You know, so these are some of the challenges, you know, in the fisheries sector compared to the agriculture sector. But it doesn't mean that, you know, it's worse, or, you know, there's still quite a number of opportunities, you know, in the fisheries sector that makes it viable. And those are some of the things that we did try to find out during the project. These are just bullets to show you some of the wide or broad challenges that are facing the fisheries sector. But our area of focus was the one highlighted in green, you know, limited access to credit and insurance, because we realized this was a big you know, gap in the sector. And a lot of the fishers are unable to access, you know, affordable credit to, you know, to scale up their businesses or fishing businesses. So that's why those are some of the things that we were looking at. And we found out a few things that, you know, are worth to invest in. So if you're keen on investing in the fisheries sector, you know, there are certain areas that I think one can look at, or the financer can look at, and invest sustainably. You know, fisheries is faced with a lot of challenges in post-harvest losses, you know, lack of cold storage facilities. I think that is a major challenge. And the technology is there, it's available, but the fishers are unable to access some of these technologies because of, you know, lack of finance. So that's an area that is worth investing. I don't think, you know, there are quite a number of technologies that are available. We won't go deeper into this, but later after the webinar, we'll be sharing some resources that will let you see some of those, you know, technologies that are involved in post, you know, to prevent or to reduce post-harvest losses. Again, vessels going out to the sea do not carry ice. You know, this is something which I found very interesting because, you know, ice is something that is very important in the fishery sector. And I fail to understand why, especially the young people, are not getting into this business, because getting an ice, you know, small ice making machine, I think it's possible, you know, and they can start, you know, producing ice and supplying these artisanal fishers. Apparently, I didn't see so many, you know, people venturing to that business, and yet, you know, the opportunity is there, you know. So cold storage, again, is something which we found that, you know, the technology is there, but no one is investing in it. So a big challenge, but yeah, an opportunity for the financiers who are interested to venture, you know, into the fishery sector. Value addition, again, most of our fish, you know, that is landed, it's not processed, you know, that much, apart from the usual frying. And you see, you know, it's only a few players who are involved in the commercial kind of value addition. So I think there's great opportunity there, you know, to invest or to help some SMEs to invest in that sector. And some of those SMEs are actually here. I've seen a few faces that are actually thinking about venturing into that area, you know. Again, another thing that we found quite interesting were the other kind of production areas like seaweed cultivation. I think for the first time, I've grown, you know, I was born in the coast, but I never thought that, you know, I could stumble into something like seaweed production, which apparently is quite valuable in the export market and can be used in a variety of things, you know, lobster rearing in cages. These are some of the innovative technologies, you know, that we stumbled on during the project. And I think, you know, there's potential for great investment there. But one issue that we felt that needed quite significant amount of investment is capacity building. I put a hyphen there, change of mindset. And I think this is an issue that plagues most of the artisanal fishers. Remember, most of the artisanal fishers, they acquire these skills from their forefathers, and they have been doing the same thing that their forefathers and ancestors and whoever have been doing. So when you try to tell them to change, to adapt to new technologies, when you try to tell them, why don't you get a semi-industrial boat for you to go deeper and catch more fish, as opposed to using your dugout canoe that only enables you to fish along the shores? It's a big issue. They don't see the viability. They say, no, I'm okay the way I am. I have my dugout canoe. I go, I come back with my 1 kilo, 2 kilos of fish. I sell, I get my $10, $20. I'm happy. Why do you want me to change? This is something I think we felt, was a big challenge. And it's nothing to do with finance. This is something that requires major capacity building, and it's requires, lots of training, but change of mindset. How do we help our artisanal fishers to change their mindset and see things differently? That is food for thought. I don't know if someone wants to interject right now, but I just wanted to just pause there and make you think, for those who are in the fisheries sector, I think you will be familiar with this challenge, and you probably have a few ideas how to address it. We want to hear from you. Again, this is an interactive session, so don't be quiet. But that issue, we realize, is a big issue, and probably that is the issue that will lead us to what we've been calling the Cafi-Ssf, which my colleague Steve will be sharing after my presentation. Gender issues. I think you can see the women lined up there selling their fish. That is the common picture you'll see when you go to the coast and you try to take a stroll in the evening, in some of the villages. You'll see these women lined up, selling their fish. So this is just a picture which shows how they're organized, So we found quite a lot of interesting stuff when we were taking an in-depth or deep dive into the female fish traders. I think some of the things are a great concern. The gender imbalance is quite high. I think you all know that the fishing business in Kenya, those who go to the sea are male, are the men. The women are unable to go into the sea, so they just wait for the fish, from their male counterparts, and they haggle their way, get the fish and sell. That's how they survive. But still, how do we scale our women, from the stage, where they are? Because this is something that has recurred for quite a long period of time, and I think it's high time that our women are empowered to participate more profitably, in the sector, apart from just frying fish and selling in the evenings. Some interesting things that we found out when we were doing the study, and we did find that a lot of the female fish traders, or mama karangas, they form majority of the common interest groups in what you call the beach management units. The beach management units are you can call them the fisher folk organizations that you find, mainly along the coast and the lake regions. Most of the fishers are organized around these beach management units, but the units are very loosely organized. Their role is really just to manage that landing site, but not to do other things. They are not like your cooperative type of group where cooperatives will try and maybe source for inputs for their members, aggregate produce and sell, and you know, and profit is shared, you know, that kind of stuff. BMUs don't do that, you know. So, but when you go into these BMUs, you'll find a lot of these women, and they have formed their own little groups within these BMUs, what you call the self-help groups. So this is how they organize themselves, and this is something that, you know, we found very interesting, because the men are not really organized. You know, the men, they are happy going into the sea, coming the fish, selling and going home. But the women, you can tell that they really want to improve their livelihoods. You know, so they are clustered in these little groups, and they do a lot of some other things, you know, some related to fisheries, some related to just their own personal welfare. You know, a lot of the table banking groups are actually championed by these women, you know. When we were talking to some of the male counterparts, actually, we were quite, you know, surprised that, you know, we were asking them, so where do you get credit? You know, and some of the male counterparts will tell us that, oh, if I want credit, I just tell my wife. She belongs in the group, so she will take credit on my behalf, and I will just channel my payment through her, you know. So we realize how important, you know, these groups are, you know, because one of the major concerns that we saw with the fisher folk is that they don't save, they don't like saving, you know. They'll tell you, what for? You know, I get my money every day, I go and use it, and I'm happy, you know. You say, why don't you want to save in the bank? So the banks, you know, they take some charges and all these things, some very, you know, lame excuse. But again, we are trying to see if they can save to upscale their business, you know. Why don't you save so that, you know, you can get a better boat, you know? And, you know, they didn't really see the need for that. Anyway, back to our findings. It's just, this is something that we're just trying to find out, you know, how are these women fish traders structured? And we realize, like I said, most of them are in these common interest groups. Most of them did not attend school, or you can say most of them are school dropouts, you know. But you find that they would actually look for the person who has the highest level of education. Probably someone who attained secondary education is probably, you know, that's according to them, you know, that's the person who is most educated. And they will just tell that person, listen, you're the one who went to school, so you are our leader. So you'll be, you know, you'll be our chairperson. You'll be advocating for us. You'll be, you know, keeping records of our contributions. You know, that's how they are, you know, that's how they operate. Very interesting, you know. It's a very, we found it it was interesting because it was a very democratic way of doing it. They didn't have, you know, tedious election processes and all that. I think they all understood their place. Say, you've gone to school, be our leader. And you find that that's the person who is going to be their leader, you know. And again, something to do with access to credit. This is something that we also found very, very interesting. Again, most of them, they have a very negative perception about financial institutions. You know, we asked them, why aren't you saving with the banks? Why aren't you taking credit from the banks? You know, most of the women will tell you, no, you know, we don't have, you know, collateral. You know, the banks have high interest rates. You know, the terms are not favorable. You know, they all came up with all sorts of excuses. So you could tell that the perception the women had on the formal financial institutions was not very good. Again, this is something that the financial sector players who are here should be thinking about, because I think this is a group that is quite viable for financing, most especially because of their saving habits. You know, I think when a financier sees someone saving, I think it's motivation for them to actually see if they can open accounts, you know, with that person. So that is how the women see the financial, or view the financial sector. But it was interesting how, you know, we saw them accessing credit from other sources, mainly informal or concessionary credit sources. One of the credit sources that we saw was very popular was one we saw in Kilifi. The county had a fund called the Mbegu Fund. So that's the fund where they would prefer to go and get their credit. And the reason why, when you ask them, they'll tell you, well, the Mbegu Fund is very simple. You know, when you want credit, all they'll do is they'll just deduct a small administrative fee, and that's it. And their repayment terms are very flexible, you know, and they pay, you know. So it was an interesting finding because we realized, okay, it looks like these women do not like complications, you know. They want simple lines of credit, you know. Tell them in black and white what this credit condition is. You want to borrow $2,000, we will deduct, say 10% of it, and that's it. The rest you repay within a 2-year period. And they say, that's it. You know, there are no hidden charges. You know, there's no fine print, you know, because since most of them are not educated, they feel like, you know, sometimes when they see a long form with lots of writings, they get scared because they feel you're trying to hide some things in those forms. So they say they prefer the simplicity of some of these credit facilities. That's why they prefer them to the formal financial institution credit facilities. And again, the groups also seem to be very well aware of the grant opportunities around them. You know, they're always aware when there's a donor coming with, you know, a facility, you know, they seem to snap it very quickly. They tell their leaders, there's an opportunity somewhere, can you go and talk on our behalf? So that's what we found out about, you know, the credit facilities and how they access, you know, credit. Again, innovation in production, value addition, and marketing. I've mentioned a few things about some of the innovations that the women prefer. Like a lot of the women prefer the seaweed farming and mariculture because they feel it's an area where they can participate in without, you know, any hassle. It's not very risky compared to going out to the sea. So seaweed farming, we saw, was quite, you know, was an alternative form of fishing that they really preferred. And one of the other things that we saw was interesting, and I'll show this in pictures. Some of the women groups actually have bought their own vessels, you know, and we found this quite interesting. And we told them, oh, so why did you buy your own vessel? They say, because we are tired of being manipulated by the fishers, by the men. You know, they go out there, they catch fish when they have agreements with them, because the agreement is verbal. When you go out to sea, catch fish, please bring some to me. So they say the men will come with their fish and then they don't honor the agreement. So they got frustrated and they came together, they bought their own boat. That is one of the boats from the women groups, you know. And we asked them, so who do you employ? We asked them. They said, well, John, we actually source our crew from Tanzania. That was another shock that we found out. Or Marigesi, when some of your fishermen disappear in Tanzania, just know they're here in Kenya.
That is part of regional integration.
Exactly. So, but it was interesting, and we asked them, why do you prefer the Tanzanian fishers, the Pembas, they say. They say, we like the Pembas because, first of all, they're trustworthy. When they go out to sea and they bring the fish, they will tell you exactly how much they caught, and they will give you the gear will still be in good shape. Everything will be in good shape. They're trustworthy, and they're good fishermen. That's what they say. They don't fear going deep into the sea. So that's why they prefer the Pemba fishermen from Tanzania. So we realized, wow, that is quite innovative. You know, I think it's something they have seen the issues around them and say, why don't you do these things differently? So with the women owning their own boat, it gives them control of the fish. This is another women group that has their own boat, Mayungu High Vision Women Group. You know, they also saw the same challenge, say, well, let's forget about this gentleman and let's buy our own boat. Okay, so that gives them control over the catch. They're able to they're able to plan, say, okay, we know this month we get this amount of catch, we will sell this. They also have diversified their business, so you don't see them sitting on the streets selling their fish like the other ladies that I saw in the picture. They have opened their own hotel where they actually sell fish, and they also supply other small hotels around them. So we thought this is quite, you know, innovative. I think the women, you know, can do quite a lot when they come together. You know, this is I don't know if some of you can see yourselves here. This is one of the places we went to in Kwale. We went to learn about seaweed farming. We just saw these are some of the officials showing us the seaweed production. These are the seaweed drying beds. This group of people here are part of the training participants who participated in the training we held in Mombasa. Some of them are here, and I know majority who came are from the Cafi-Ssf network here in Kenya. I hope we do more of these trainings. You know, like I said, outside Kenya, we plan to go next year in Nigeria, hopefully, Ghana. Maregesi, you can also invite us to come to Tanzania. We can do this training. We'll share the training reports with you and the training curriculum. It's quite a heavy curriculum, but it's quite interesting. And I think next time we do this training, please tell your counterparts to attend. I wanted to finish my presentation with this slide, the 7th World Congress, which is happening in Mexico, in Morelia. This is a special Congress for us because the session that Africa is going to lead will actually be on fisheries. Most of the learnings that we have obtained from the study, and not just the MDF project, but also there are other projects that we are doing in fisheries. Like there's another project that we are doing in 9 other countries in Africa called the Fish for ACP, which includes Tanzania, Zambia, Senegal, Gambia. So we are attaining quite a lot of knowledge in the sector. And we felt we should actually try and continue with the awareness creation through the session in the 7th World Congress in Morelia. And maybe some good announcement that I would like to make is some of you who are here, we are actually sponsoring them to attend the event. Maregesi, I know you're one of them. So we look forward to being with you in Mexico. There's also Karembo Mweni. Karembo is also a member of the Cafi-Ssf network chapter here in Kenya. She has also been nominated to join the Africa team in Mexico. So these are great opportunities, you know, to showcase, and I'm sure there'll be more opportunities coming in the future, you know, for our members or network members to go and talk about the good things they're doing in the fisheries sector. Maregesi, we did a very interesting case study on CRDB and how they're financing the fisheries sector. I don't know how far you've gone, Maregesi. The last time we spoke, I remember you mentioned that you had a few applications on your table for some fisher folk who wanted some vessels. How did that go? Can you shed some light a little bit?
John, thank you. And as far as CRDB Bank is concerned, we are still continuing with supporting the fishing sector. And more interesting is on the small-scale fisheries, and with clear focus on the islets of Tanzania, the islets of Unguja and Pemba.
Okay.
And what we have done so far, we are partnering with the Revolutionary Government of Zanzibar to make sure that we change the mindset, as you have been commenting during your presentation, by giving the new fishing gears, which are modern.
Okay.
You know, in previous days, fishers were just using the wood-made canoes, which do not go to distant areas for catching fish. Now we have designed proper fishing vessels made out of fibers. So we are giving them fiber boats, which are having the engines. And actually, these will allow them to go a bit far from where they were just fishing around the ocean shore.
The shore.
And because they were fishing nearby, it was distracting the environment. Now we are telling them the advantage of going a bit far where there is potential of catching more fish, but it was also preserving the environment, as it won't distract the areas where fish can produce eggs, and the young generation can come up. So apart from that, we have been also designing a model to mitigate the risk that banks can face. As you have said, fishers are so mobile.
Yeah.
They can move from one shore to another, from the islets to the mainland, and vice versa. So the model that we are using currently is through lending through fisher groups. And by fisher group, we obtain the so-called group guarantee.
Okay.
In such a way that for an individual fisher to get support from the bank, they need to go through their groups for proper identification and introduction to be made. And actually, these groups have leaders. So leaders are helping the bank to make sure that the cash flow is always there, and repayment source is actually reliable. So with this, the mobility risk is contained. On the other hand, we have been designing the models of de-risking the sector by using credit guarantee schemes. We have various guarantee schemes that are cushioning the collateral deficiencies that smallholder fishers are facing.
Okay.
We are having Past Trust, one of the organization which is locally in Tanzania, and we have the Development Bank of Tanzania, Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank. They are having the special guarantee schemes for smallholder fishers and the smallholder farmers. So this guarantee provides collateral coverage of up to 50% for a normal fisher. And for special groups like youth and women, the guarantee cover goes up to 80% coverage. So we found that we can mitigate them. And the other thing is on the taking the fishing gears as collateral. Okay. As you buy a fiber boat, it may not have the specific document of title like a motor vehicle.
Yes.
So what we do with the collaboration from the government, they make registration of the boats, and they are given the unique numbers of registration in such a way that you can now formalize to mortgage the chattel of the financed fishing gear. So it's also complementing the collateral deficiency. So far, we have seen that Tanzania is having a lot of resources, being it the water bodies that we have. The exclusive economic zone is huge. And along India Ocean by itself is having around 1,400 kilometers long. So we are having over 600,000 square kilometers of fishing in the country, but the potential is yet to be maximized. And apart from this resource that we have through the Indian Ocean, we are having huge water bodies, the lakes, rivers, which can also guarantee sustainability in terms of aquaculture, technology, fish caging, and the like. Only that in Africa and the East African region at large, caging seemed to be a new technology altogether. So fishers were used to just to go to the lakes and to the oceans for catching fish in big water bodies of which are naturally available. But the mechanization of caging has just started recently, and we have seen the potential of it. With caging, you can actually ascertain the cash flow based on number of fish that are kept in each cage, the expected weight of per piece of fish that is contained in there, and the type of feeds that need to be given for the fish to grow as expected. So it needs guidance, it needs understanding on how actually the aquaculture can be developed. Now, the gap is on the understanding, first by fishers themselves, especially in the caging, but also to banks. We don't have adequate knowledge on how we can assess the cash flow and make sure that we invest, because most of these investors seem to be as startup projects. The business plan are well written, but inside the lenders, the banks do not have special qualified staff who can actually take lead in making a sound proposal that can give approval out of it. So in a way, we are mixing the two by financing those who are just doing fishing in the natural bodies, but we also take lead in terms of supporting these new technologies of fish caging and fish ponds, which are yet to be in large scales, because only few have identified some places, and some have been granted the ability to use the existing water bodies like lakes to fish by means of caging. So most of the technology is imported actually from Asia and Europe. Now, they need expertise to have experts from abroad who can nurture the indigenous on how to handle their projects. So that is the transformation that is going on, but we see that there is light in the tunnel. For those who are doing caging, the cash flow is almost reliable, depending on how the assessment is done and the projections are made. So they go with the reality of what is supposed to be done. And what I see that we are incurring more cost is on the importation of fish feeds. We are yet to groom our own investors who can produce the feeds for our own fishers. So they depend to borrow for the capex on the caging facilities, but they also need to have working capital for importation of fish feeds.
Oh, fish, yeah.
Which we see like if we could have done it on our own, the cost could have been moderated to the acceptable level, and maybe the return to fishers could be of ample margin. So it is a call upon us all, and maybe through Africa platform, we can get a sense of building capacity to financial institutions, so that we transform our normal way of assessing the fishing sector into the highly improved model, and perhaps the way of analyzing the cash flow and even the risk analysis, so that we can incorporate the same across the region. This will make easy way of turning around subsistence fishing to purely commercial investment.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that is what I see. But with regard to insurance, yes, insurers are still skeptical in terms of what to insure.
Yeah.
They only insure those things which are tangible. The charters can be insured, the engine boats can be insured, but what about the yields? So you may feed the fish with the wrong feeds, and their growth might be not the way you wished them to be. So it may end up with losses sometimes. Now, how are we reinforcing and make sure that we cover such risks like the yields in the crops? So we think that there is a need to go deeper and make sure that we ring-fence both by cushioning the collaterals, but also mitigating the risks in terms of productivity. But above all, through group lending, actually, it comes easier to get repayments through the group cash flows. Yes, but if you lend it to individual fishers, they tend to move from one mwalo to another, from one dipco to another, from one lakeshore to another, in a way that you cannot trace them easily. But the technology is also there. These fishers need to have GPS techniques and appliances that can lead them to be traced wherever they are. And we have the mobile phones. The mobile phones should not only end into facilitating the banking transactions, but also as a means of simplifying the means of payment systems, even to farmers and the fishers as well. Because the technology as we use, most of currently the technology that is used is more of manual or semi-manual. But the world is changing from physical movement of cash to instant payment systems. So it is easier for those who are taking the role of taking the produce to be linked with banks, so that payments can be made electronically, and the fishers can also see what has been channeled through their bank accounts. And wherever they need services, they need also to get the service instantly, so long they are just connected with the network of the MNOs. But above all, the storage facilities is still a challenge. You have talked about the ice making factories, but even how to take those ices with their boats. The boats needs to have storage facilities in place, so that they can collect enough quantity of fish for those who are going through the oceans and lakes before they bring for aggregation and selling to the shore. They have to preserve the fish quality until when they are ready to come back. Otherwise, they'll be having so many routes going and coming back, even if they have just caught little amount of fish. So we need to make mechanization both along the shores. The cold storage rooms should fisheries at any point can access the service without necessarily traveling a long distance, coming to the main cities for collection of ice. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Marigesi. Thank you for those insights. It's great to hear what CRDB is doing. I hope our counterparts here in Kenya, the MEST and the rest in Nigeria, you're listening to some of these, great insights from the financial sector players. So thank you so much. I like how you have managed to go around some of the challenges that I highlighted, collateral, how you're registering the gears and the vessels, the group lending, the guarantees. I think those are great financing innovations that we would like to see happening in the sector. So again, we'll have to move very quickly to our last agenda. So at this point, I would like to call my good friend Steve to share with us about the deliberations we had on the Cafi-Ssf network. Steve, over to you. I don't know if you have a presentation or you would like to just talk from your seat.
So, Lord John, I'll just speak.
Okay.
Based on the discussions that we had last week.
All right.
And one, I really do appreciate having been part of this process. And indeed, this has been a very exciting intervention. One of those that I've been very much delighted to be part of. But importantly, one of the outputs that we were expected to actually come up with was was a form of an outfit that would agitate or promote small-scale fishers in Kenya. That was the initial thinking. But from our discussions that last week, that seemed to have actually taken a different direction. I want to start by saying that we had a workshop, and that is one of those outputs in the project that John has mentioned. That was actually held between 11th and 12th of August in Tuapa, which is in Kilifi County. And this drew a number of financial service providers. Unfortunately, at that point, we didn't have any insurance service provider attending, though subsequently we had participation of at least one in one of the activities that we had later. During the meeting, some thinking was brought up that how do we name this network? And it was unanimously agreed by the participants that we call it Cafi-Ssf Kenyan chapter. For lack of any other better name. Of course, Cafi, the abbreviation of it, again, is something that we need to look at in terms of its translation into English. Of course, that is one concern that the SG had during our meeting last week. There was a WhatsApp group that was actually set up, and there's been quite some bit of communication. And I want to appreciate the efforts of those who have been very active in that group in terms of sharing new information and sharing material that would actually help in enhancing knowledge of the membership of the fisheries sector in Kenya. On the 15th, that is last week when we met, we discussed on how best do we formalize the Cafi-Ssf Kenya chapter. some of the thinking or the thoughts that we had was on what would be the core activities of the Kenyan chapter of Cafi-Ssf. We also pondered on how to keep members on the platform engaged and expand the network beyond the Kenya to Africa in general. In fact, the new thinking is Africa being a regional body, it would be much more prudent for us to drive Cafi, the Cafi-Ssf, not as a Kenyan chapter as it were, but as an African outfit. The other thing, we were also to define core activities of this chapter and create a work plan for it for at least for a period of 2 years, which then would be able to make members understand what role they would be able to play over the 2-year period. We also had to agree on preparations for Cafi-Ssf Kenya webinar, which we're actually handling today. And I think we've had a very, very good discussion, and I'm very excited by the number of people who've actually participated in this webinar. And even the input from, is it Maregesi? Yeah, so that was quite informative. So the other thing that we did, we had to define core objectives, mission statement, and a member mobilization for Cafi-Ssf, and now African chapter. Because, and again, now that we have quite a number of you from elsewhere, away from Kenya, we are looking at it from that perspective. So some of the proposals that were made are key areas of focus for the chapter that will help address the most pressing challenges of SSF. Would include disorganized fisher folk associations, which is actually very clear. We've seen that. Whereas cooperatives would be a better vehicle to use, but the only successful or almost viable cooperative that we've seen so far was the one that was engaging in seaweed farming. In the other BMUs, we did not see much active cooperatives. So we need to look at what are other business models other than cooperatives, or how then do we reorganize cooperatives at the county level or in various places that would be targeting the fisher folk, where they could actually be able to support the growth of small-scale fishers. Another thing is actually about data. This is a big problem in this sector. To find real data that can be able to be used by financiers is a big challenge. Record keeping is really not exciting. So you can't determine even the cash flows. Of course, cooperatives, like we said, while they are there, of course, at least the only one that we saw that was akin to showing some level of efficiency was the one that was doing seaweed farming. So this data is very critical in terms of financial service providers to actually engage with the fishers. So it's something that needs to be instilled amongst the fishers. Of course, there's also the element of reluctance by financial institutions to support the fisheries sector, which is a big concern. And that is a hindrance towards achieving gains on the blue economy. Interestingly, I've seen suggestions. This is still up in the social media, of the possibility of the creation of a blue economy ministry within the government of Kenya. So that, again, would really help in promoting some of these things. And particularly in terms of making financial service providers to see the value of supporting this sector. We've actually come up with financial business models which have actually shown the viability of these businesses if so supported. We've, like John had mentioned earlier, we've seen Mama Karangas, if they're able to come together and work together, either as self-help groups like what we saw in Kilifi, or as cooperatives, they're able to be much more viable. They're able to have their own boats. They're able to even diversify, like the group in Kilifi, which does not only have their own boat, nor have their own eateries, they also have their own transport system. And they're also offering outside catering services. So it is a possible way through which the small-scale fishers, and particularly women in this case, can be able to be supported. Capacity building cannot be gainsaid on financial literacy and management. One of the things, again, John had mentioned this, you find most of the small-scale fishers, they do not keep any records at all. So they also need to be trained on the value of actually keeping records. Of course, I've already mentioned this with regard to how do they manage their cash flows, etc. But importantly, how do they understand their business performance? And that is a big challenge, because you find even one of the most successful ones that we engaged with, that we felt was more of a transformative small-scale fisher, still doesn't keep any records. So that was quite a challenge. So again, we need to enhance knowledge management. Of course, under knowledge management, we are looking at issues of research, which is actually a continuous intervention. And here again, research can be done either through Cafi-Ssf or through collaboration with other government agencies like Cafi, for example. But then Cafi-Ssf itself needs to have a very robust monitoring and evaluation system, so that it can be able to capture data that can inform how the sector is performing. Yeah. Another thing that came out very strongly that we saw was the need to enhance, to manage disputes amongst the small-scale fishers. And one of the things that we thought about was how then do we drive alternative dispute resolution amongst the sector players, which is quite critical, rather than having them go through litigation. Overall, the network will aim, rather, we propose that the network should facilitate access to finance and formalization of SSF to be sustainable. And specifically, our thinking was that we push agenda for SSF to be formalized, because most of them, as we speak, are actually not formal. Very few are formal. During the period of the project, other than the women, Mama Karangas, we met in Kilifi, and the group that we met in Kwale doing seaweed, most of them are actually not formal. So it is important that they are formalized. And I know my friend Sitati has really been pushing for the need to actually have this formalized as cooperatives because of the benefits associated with it. Generally, there are two ways of formalizing an entity in this country. It is either by registration as a cooperative society or by registration as a company. It is only then that you can be able to access credit facilities. Groups that are registered as self-help groups, unfortunately, have that limitation that they cannot be able to access credit facilities other than those that are offered by, county governments, like in the case of Mbegu Fund in Kilifi. We also felt that there's need to identify key issues affecting formalized SSF and link them with different stakeholders at their point of need and facilitate access to finance in the fish value chain. And there are actually so many service providers in this case that or stakeholders, as it were, that we're looking at, because we're looking at how do they access business development services, and then how do we look at this from downstream, and then how are they linked also upstream so that they're able to, the value chain is able to operate to be deemed to be much more effective. Capacity building of SSF and financial services, financial institutions on key issues including record keeping, financial literacy, and good governance. This includes the office bearers and secretariat that should actually drive that course. So because we envisage to have a small office that should be able to drive that purpose. Another intervention was to boost initiatives that finance small-scale fishers, for instance, the cooperative fund in Nakuru County, which has clearly, the county government of Nakuru has actually pronounced itself that they're actually going to have 1 billion Kenya shillings for cooperatives annually. So that is actually a big boost. Of course, Kilifi County has made some very tremendous progress. We hope that the new governor will actually continue doing the same. Then, of course, we need quarterly meetings. We had actually suggested this when we met at Beaumont. Unfortunately, we've not been able to have this. It is good that we finally triggered this process today during this webinar. And I pray that now we activate it and make it a reality so that we have quarterly meetings through which we are able to actually give feedback to the team. We are able to drive new knowledge. We are able to share new knowledge with all actors in the sector, and particularly those who are involved in this process. Another thing we need, that we ought to do, that we felt is a very key intervention area, is to build strong profile and visibility of Cafi-Ssf and expand its reach throughout the continent. Of course, there was the thought of rebranding the name Cafi-Ssf to convey a meaning in the African context. Again, that is something that's food for thought. Some of us feel that we still need to keep the name Cafi-Ssf, but we leave it to the membership to actually engage with that and determine exactly what name should it take. Of course, through knowledge management, we would actually be able to publish periodic newsletters and through which we would be able to disseminate information on available technologies in the sector. And this includes, interventions working out in the various African countries, not just in Africa, if we so actually appreciate that we need to drive this in the entire Africa region. One of the things that we also came up with, which to me was quite exciting, was to have a Cafi-Ssf academy. And the academy would be much more focused on training, targeting SSF, financial service providers, and other stakeholders on key issues affecting the blue economy. So this would be a very specific outfit that would run on driving training activities on specific areas or thematic areas, running not just in Eastern Africa, but actually in the entire African region. So that is another thought that our intervention area that was actually discussed. Another thought was to initiate a global award for outstanding work in the fisheries sector with focus on innovative activities in relation to finance and facilitate benchmark opportunities to learn from other stakeholders and organize ministerial conference on fisheries. John has already mentioned about the work ongoing in Thailand, and it would have been very good if we could have had participation by persons from Asia, particularly from Thailand, to learn on the experiences in the implementation of MDF. That not lost, definitely, I believe, through Cafi-Ssf, would be able to gather some more information and learn or share through the platforms that we have. Something else that we need to thoroughly think through, because once we have the vehicle on, it will need funding. How do we drive business development? What are the sources of financing are we looking at? Okay. Who are some of the potential partners that can be able to support small-scale fishers? So that is another intervention area that was actually discussed and would be very critical for us to think through as a team, or appreciate that needs to be looked at. In terms of driving this exercise going forward, we looked at, as we start off, where do we hinge this intervention? So we agreed, or rather we suggested during that meeting, because we were only a few of us, we suggested that we have Africa host the secretariat for a period, and Africa to help the project, because I won't call it a program for now, or maybe we can call it a program because of the element of having the academy, to host the program for a period of time, not definite, as it helps it build its structures. Hopefully becoming an autonomous outfit after some time. But for now, Africa would actually host the program. So that again was our suggestion, because there's quite a lot that needs to be done. There's quite a lot of background work that needs to be done to actually make Cafi-Ssf a reality, not just in Kenya, but in Africa. Operating in Africa has its own advantages, as opposed to just operating in one country. Because many a times you find there are certain innuendos in specific countries that probably can actually make it very difficult for you to work in. But when you're working in several countries, Africa with more than 54 countries, suppose you have 10 positive thinking countries, then you are able to have quite some substantial work going on, as opposed to just focusing on one country that could be having its own challenges. So that is the thinking that we had, and I actually throw it back to you, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for that. So for my Cafi-Ssf members, I see a hand already. Engineer Robert, you have something burning? Please go ahead. Okay, Engineer Robert, we'll proceed. I thought I saw a hand from your side. Yeah, so that in a nutshell is what we deliberated on Cafi-Ssf. For the Cafi-Ssf Kenya chapter members, I hope we have not taken away your baby. We have not killed your baby. But the idea to expand, I think, is in good faith. I think everyone wants to learn, you know. It's just not Kenya. And what Steve has said, that we can leverage on our membership in the different countries and build a good brand for Cafi-Ssf if we take it outside Kenya. That was the thinking. So I don't know if anyone wants to respond either to my initial presentation or to the Cafi-Ssf presentation made by Steve. Anyone who has another thought, a comment, please feel free.
Hello,
Alice.
good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, who is this? Is this engineer?
Yes, who is this? Is this engineer? Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Engineer Robert from NASA, Nigeria.
All right.
All right. Yes, we need to share about that Nigeria is doing, championed by NASA.
Mm-hmm.
We first thank Africa for putting us together.
Mm-hmm.
We have been a partner of Africa for that collaboration.
Yeah.
We happen to be smallholder farming facilitation agency. We de-risk agriculture and facilitate finance for smallholder farmers in Nigeria.
Okay.
We have been finding it a bit better with some agricultural sector, but especially the fish, we are experiencing the same problem that every other financier is experiencing, the amorphous nature. But we've been trying to get around it. We have two approaches. The approach is through the Fishers Association, which includes Fishnet, which is African Women Fishers Association. They have a widespread tentacles in Nigeria and West Africa. Then we are promoting the cage culture. It may interest people to know that Ghana, having succeeded in cage culture almost all the big fishes in West Africa are produced in Ghana, in the Volta region. Two of the main companies, Tropofarm and Triton, left Nigeria for Ghana.
Okay.
So now NISAL is having a challenge that why should we Nigerians that are the highest importer of fish in Africa and the fourth highest importer of fish across the globe, just fourth to US, Japan, and China. Why shouldn't we be able to organize improvement in our fishery? But two things come out. The fear of the banks to lend to the sector, and then the lack of capacity. And that is where Africa should come in. Africa should focus on Nigeria to see that the capacity is developed, while NISAL is on ground to facilitate the financing. You know, we facilitate finance through putting on our credit risk guarantee, such a way that the banks or the financier will feel comfortable. But still, we have that operational risk that is quantum. So there's need for capacity development. So one of our requests for Africa, which we take advantage of this session to do, is to look into the case of Nigeria and see how we can forge ahead to do something that will capacitate the smallholder farmers, especially towards operating small-scale cage cultures as is obtainable in the Volta region in Ghana. That will help a lot. So that is what we just want to share with the House.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Engineer. Engineer, you know, us here at Africa, we know who NARSAL is, but majority of the members here don't know NARSAL. It's a big acronym.
Okay. Let me just break it down. NARSAL is Nigerian Incentive-Based Risk-Sharing System for Agricultural Lending.
Great.
Nigeria is incentive-based sharing system for agricultural lending. So it's a long name. That's why we cut it down. Now we have been supporting other nations too to form their own. Like in Ghana is GIRSAL. We have one in Togo. Then we are cropping up with some in Sudan, Gambia, and other countries. So maybe we'll soon be in Kenya.
Hopefully. Hopefully, but it's the incentive structure is a very interesting one. I wish we could have some, Cafi incentive based scheme for the fishery sector. I think that would be great. But I like some of the lessons that you have learned so far. I wish we had more time, but I'll reach out to you because we want to start documenting some of these things. We don't want to lose some of these innovative financing practices. And that is the reason why we are thinking of a structured way of doing it, hence the Cafi-Ssf network. So Engineer, I'll be reaching out to you very soon. Thank you all for those who have shared their comments on the chat. Wow, quite a lot of comments, but I don't have time to read them all because we are supposed to finish in the next 10 minutes. But anyone else with another issue? Alice, welcome. I see you've managed to join us. I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Alice. Oh, Alice has gone.
No, I'm not gone. I'm multitasking.
Good, Alice. Please tell us who you are. Some people don't know what you're doing, why you're here, and what you do.
Okay. It's good afternoon in Nairobi, and it's very sunny.
Yes.
I work with FAO Kenya as the focal point for fisheries and blue economy. My name is Alice Jesse. So I'm happy to take note that there's been a lot of progress made under this project, especially on the activities that are being implemented by AFRACA. So congratulations to the team. I look forward to see the final, especially the training manual. I'm keen on that.
All right.
And also your reports, so that I know where you are at. Thank you.
Great. So ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Alice, and she holds a desk. There's a word she's used, blue economy. You know, blue economy, the first blue economy conference was held in Kenya. And Alice was one of the outputs of that conference. So she's now holding a desk and trying to champion matters related with blue economy. In our training, we really focused a lot on matters blue economy, Alice, so that, you know, just so you know. So we'll be sharing the training manual. Kafayat, I see your hand is up. You wanted to share something?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I am Kafayat Fakoya.
Okay.
I'm associate professor of the Lagos State University, and also with vast interest in small-scale fisheries, aquaculture, and allied marine sciences. Now, it's a very interesting topic, and I'm grateful that I'm able to attend this webinar. My point is this: I listened to my brother from Nigeria who mentioned about NESAL. I know about NESAL that they're into risk lending, risk sharing of insurance and stuff like that. But I want to make it known to you that for the small-scale fisheries sector, assessing financial lending, I'm lending from the formal financial institution has always been a thorn in the flesh for them. You know, because of the so many factors that has been have been spoken about and discussed on this platform. Now, but then we know that I know that from my own previous encounters and also projects I've been involved in the small-scale fisheries sector, I know that lending is highly informal, and within them they have these traditional groups, credit groups of savings, and also lending. They are called alajo. And these alajo systems, although they operate on small scale, they happen to sustain the small scale fish sectors to a large extent. You know, there's a limit to what they can actually borrow or lend to one another, you know, because it is a traditional form of system. Now, it has been sustainable. It is low risk for them. The creditors who are the largest, they understand them, they know them, because savings are often done daily, you know, and then the lendings are often rotational. And even outside the fishery sector, people do engage in such social, lending platforms. It's very common in Nigeria. And I want to say that because this type of arrangement has been sustainable, though low in terms of the skill, I think there should be a way we can harness such platforms, because all these other formal platforms have not really been accessible to the small-scale fisheries. That has been the problem, and it will continue to be a problem because the arrangements are not, are not appropriate for the small-scale fishers, as we have learned, you know, because of the mobility and other things like that. So I think the government should try to harness the traditional forms, the existing platforms that are available to them, and try to build on that, maybe by trying to scale up those traditional forms, link them up with micro banks or micro financial providers and informal sector, and see how they can now, you know, leverage on this. Even though the small scale fishers have associations and cooperatives that are often registered, but you know that they lack capacity even in terms of organizing themselves. And that has always been a challenge. So of course they will need training, they will need capacity building in terms of bringing them up, making them aware of how to, you know, harness such resources, being together in the cooperative, and then go for bigger loans or credit facilities. But then I think the existence of the traditional forms of savings and thrift should be utilized as a fulcrum to drive, you know, credit facilities in the small scale fishery sector. It should be a starting point, rather than looking for platforms, you know, that are top bottom. We should look at a bottom up approach. That is the way I think it will work best for most of our operators in the small scale fishery sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Kafayat. I think you raise a very important point, and I don't know if Lixia is here. There was a lady, Lixia, and I know she's been very keen on what you have just said. A lot of the fisher folk borrow from the informal, groupings. I know we've been trying to see how we can bring in the private sector. It's good to see NARSAL, CRDB in Tanzania trying to do something for the small-scale fisheries, but we have been told if we are to finance these groups sustainably, the starting point should be these informal groupings that they have. Kafayat, you mentioned in Nigeria they are called Alajo. Yeah. In Kenya we call them, what do you call them? Merry-go-rounds. Table banking groups. VSLAs. All those names. I think we are all familiar with them. But what we discovered in our project is that yes, they can save, but I think there's a limit they can go. When we started talking to them about, are you thinking about acquiring, say, a semi-industrial boat through your own savings? And they said, no, their savings are not enough to enable them to scale up to that level. So they still need some kind of hybrid kind of support that should come in and just, take these groups to, another level where they can do something much more commercially viable. So I think these are areas which we still need to explore. The scope for research in fisheries is still very wide. And that is the reason, that is one of the things that we want to start doing here through the Cafi-Ssf network. So I've seen so many other comments. I know some have even said, please, can you share the recording after this? We are actually recording this webinar, so we'll make it available to you. It will be a long one. This is almost 2-hour recording. So we will be able to share it with you after or once we've done a few editings and put it nicely together. I don't know, maybe one final comment before I hand over to the Secretary General to close the webinar, because we are now running short of time. Any other final comment?
Hello, John. Thank you very much for organizing today's meeting. First, I'd like to commend Africa for how you've been conducting the MDF project, and I love the approach that you're having. It's very impact oriented. I also commend the efforts being made towards formalizing Cafi-Ssf network, and I support the idea of taking it to a multilateral level for leveraging of the resources. And again, if at any point we shall play a policy advocacy role, then I would say using the trickling down approach from the regional level will make it even more effective. And yeah, so it's we are on the right track, and looking forward to more. Just one last point to give, as much as we are also involving youth as beneficiaries, I would also request that we make sure we also engage them in decision making. So while structuring, make sure you put that into consideration. Yes, okay. Thank you very much, and all the best, everyone.
Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you for always reminding us about the youth. So we'll try and do that. Now, I think there's something that we need to do maybe before we close. We had a WhatsApp group. Some of you are still part of it. But now that we have decided to open up the group, some of you, I'm sure, will also want to be part of it. So the WhatsApp group, for those who are not part of it, you're missing quite a lot because there's so much information sharing going on, which I think could be helpful to all of you in the spheres of your work. So probably I will suggest if you can share, those who are interested in joining the group, and it's still growing, I'm glad it's still growing, to share your mobile phone number so that we can put you in the group. There's another group that we had, I know from the training. It looks like, Thomas, what do you think? It looks like we may have to end up to break that group and merge it with the Cafi group, so that we have, one line of communication. That was my thought at this point in time. But please, for those who want to join, please share your numbers. I see numbers coming in. Please keep on sharing. We will collect them, and you will see yourself being added onto the group. There are quite a number of exciting things that we always discuss. So I think now it's time we bring in the rest. Thomas, over to you, please.
I believe you can hear me.
Yes, yes, we can.
Thank you very much, John, for leading us through the entire program. I think that participants have been very engaging, and that makes me happy because going forward, we are now getting a lot of ideas. Those from NERSL and the other institutions in Nigeria and other places have raised issues that are of great concern that we have to look at going forward. There are, even though our time is up, I will implore you to stay for just 5 minutes. There are some objectives that we have not achieved, which we set for this meeting. And I want us to achieve those objectives because it is those objectives that will keep us going forward. The first one has been partially achieved, and that is the, what do we call it? Making Africa the Secretariat. I think when we formed Cafi-Ssf, we hinted it. It has come up again, but now we are confirming and affirming that the Secretariat has taken charge. And steering the affairs of this program in Africa. The innovation we have brought in is that we have two other members. Steve, who is a consultant who helped to do this work. And we also have Sitati, those who go to our WhatsApp platform. You see him sending a lot of things there. In order to put up an agenda for discussion, we have brought the two as part of those who will be planning for those things. And this is just the beginning. As time goes on, interested members who will want to be part of shaping the agenda for Cafi-Ssf, we will be very happy to welcome you. So on that note, I declare the Africa as the Secretariat completely put in place for our program. And then two, we also said that we want to have a program, if even tentative, that will guide us so that you will not just be there and then we float something we are going to meet. It doesn't look well organized. So we are doing a 2-year program. We have discussed with FAO, and that 2-year program, we presume it started at the end, from the beginning of this year. We will do it on quarterly basis. Maybe for the beginning, just 45 to 1 hour, we will bring up an issue and then we discuss. And so I want to believe that from the first quarter to this time, we have done something that we can assume that we started in first quarter. Because if you remember, in the first quarter, we convened a meeting of members on the platform to discuss issue that has been raised by the Kenya government with respect to amendment to small-scale fisheries law in Kenya. We discussed it on the platform, and we provided an input to the government, which is well accepted. So we did that in the first quarter. In the second quarter, I think we did some other things like the Mombasa workshop and other discussions. So that one was also done. I want to take this as something for the third quarter, the one that we have done for today, updating and then fashioning out a program for our platform. So this is the third quarter. So fourth quarter, we have to get something. And then for the whole of next year, 4 quarters, Can we, I don't want to, I have something I can mention, but I want it to participate participatory. What other things can we look up to discuss going forward, particularly in the light of the presentations made by John and Steve? I can see that the definition for Cafi-Ssf as our title is still not resolved, but we don't have time. I have couched something. I won't bring it here now, but I think that in the next meeting it can be packed plus something. What name do we give to? I think that we have to give a name that instantly registers an understanding to whoever listens to it. If you tell me Cafi-Ssf, if you like, let me do an exam here. How many of you can define to me, those here, what is Cafi-Ssf? You have to think, even those who know, you have to try to put the ideas together and then redefine it. So the name can be there, but it is a global network that is called that name. So that global network has a meaning. So we can send a letter with a little meaning on it to all of you, and then you look at it. At the next meeting, we will agree on the name. Of course, into bracket, Cafi-Ssf, to reflect that we are part of the global community. So in December quarter, the definition, and then what do you think, does anybody have something that is short that we can bring up for discussion during that meeting? December quarter, and then think about first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter of next year. We can revise them, but let's have something done. There have been issues on youth. It can come in somewhere. I don't know which quarter we can discuss. So that is an option. Steve mentioned issues of data. How do we get data on the small scale fisheries sector? This is something that we have to discuss. It can be one of the topical areas. Maybe even for 2 quarters, we can discuss it. So I just want ideas. Let's get some things down. If even we can't put them in quarters, let's list some ideas which the Secretariat and the core team will put together and then send it to you whilst you are away for any comment to be provided. Oh, you are all satisfied with what I'm saying?
Oscar, I'm seeing you've put something. I don't know if it's related to what the SD is proposing. I'm seeing you've put data.
So we have data, we have youth issues. What again?
Yes,
talk
a bit
Oscar. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Down here because Thomas is talking about, and thank you so much for even asking about that. One, and I'll be quick because I know we don't have time, but last week I was part of a workshop that was setting up a curriculum for aquaculture, mariculture for the Tibet space in Kenya. And yes, you're absolutely right. Data is not there. It had to be captured, and personally, I was being a banker. I was very forceful about that. Now, second, I was part of. I was lucky to go to Zanzibar for their seaweed festival, and they have a very successful model that incorporates academia, which is the universities and research institutions, the government, and the private sector. And the same was replicated in this workshop. So maybe there is that bit of having and the youth, just like Almas said, having everybody set the framework as opposed to one person leading the way. And then thirdly, there is the bit of benchmarking and taking having a look at what is happening internationally. And I'm happy that even FAO is here. And hopefully marrying the same to a common mutual pathway that we can follow. Thank you so much.
Good. You are welcome. any other area of concern? We can even think of case studies. If there is a good case study, I think that the MDF work, still there are case studies we haven't discussed in a webinar, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I think in the interest, yeah.
Yeah, we can raise some of
we
them.
can still maybe document professionally and publish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course we can also have webinars on them to sharpen the focus. Maybe even before the publication. So case studies will come in. Any other for consideration? Maybe perhaps the last one.
I'm seeing my friend engineer still coming strong about, is it cage? Yeah, the idea of cage farming has come out very strongly in this meeting. Engineer, I don't know what you had in mind that we can do around it, but Almas, I see you're talking about designing frameworks for transition. I don't know if you can shed more light on that. Governance and operations.
Yeah, okay, this may not be an immediate issue, but it's something that it's something that should be thought of, since now that we are grateful that Africa is hosting Cafi, but at some point, so you have mentioned the network will become autonomous, so there should be frameworks for a smooth transition so that transition doesn't affect operations and impacting the lives of people. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, John.
Yes.
Is related to data too. We consider looking at the different regions of Africa and do some studies on the species and the water suitability, such that we can know which of these imported fishes can be grown in financing into those areas.
Okay. Alice, I know you've done something around mapping in Kenya. I don't know if there's something you have for the African region. Those one time you shared with me a very technical map. These are very technical assignments, Ignatius. I don't know if we'll be able to undertake it as Africa and Cafi-Ssf. But again, that is something that we also need to think about. You know, let's not assume that this is an organization which is totally, which wants to take up all the issues in the fisheries sector. You know, let's be very, very specific in our undertakings. You know, let's be unique. You know, because I know there are other institutions around who are doing certain things which, we can actually collate and package for our purpose as Cafi-Ssf. So let's be very, very specific. You know, I like the idea of even a simple newsletter. You know, just something, to start sharing with everyone that this is, this is something that is happening. Already even from this webinar, I've been hearing some very interesting, stories, interesting cases. Could we start doing something, even if it's a light, newsletter? It could be for the next quarter, not this quarter, but something, something we can start disseminating. Alice, and I count on your support as the Blue Economy Desk to help us with that.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, participants, for your very good contributions. We have noted a lot of contributions also on the chat. Brian, make sure you save all of them.
And the phone numbers, eh?
And the phone numbers,
yeah.
So that we will take good care of those issues and discuss them. If there is any opportunity to link up with any of you on any issues, we will not hesitate. We will do that. So maybe before I conclude, let me say that it's been a very good meeting that has been very engaging. The presentation has brought out a lot of challenges as well as opportunities. And I'm glad that the attendance has been very good, not only with participants from Kenya, but from Nigeria and other places. And from what we got from the presentations, I can see things that later we will have to group them into short-term things that we can do, medium-term things that we can do, and then long-term things. When we do it that way, it will even help us to know properly how, if we want funding, we can look at it and then seek for funding support. Immediately, we'll handle the low-hanging fruits, those that we can do easily. And they will come from some of the things that we have just listed, getting to the end of the project. And I'm glad that when the challenges were mentioned in the presentations, some of the contributions, especially from Tanzania and Nigeria and others, tried to resolve some of the issues that have become barriers for lending to the sector. And we see the innovative way that CRDB has done. The group lending limits those who are mobile. Once you're in a group, if you run away, your group will bring you back. So it means that it is a model that those who want to finance the sector must adopt. And then that issue that also came up concerning the change of mindset. They all think that this is mine, not this is ours. In fact, Africans, we are fond of this. Even those of us educated, this is mine, as against this is ours. But if you pull together resources and you grow 10% and you are big, it's far better than somebody who goes alone and grows 20%. You won't come near the bigger one in terms of knowledge, expertise, profit, and so on. So that also has come out really. So changing the mindset means capacity building. And this issue was mentioned highly by one of the Nigerian speakers, that financial institutions fear to come to the sector. Two, there is no capacity building that can help. So it means we must look at capacity building in two ways. One for the fishers, the artisanal fishers, and then one also for the financial institutions. And then caging, I noted, has become an issue, as John mentioned. And then grooming of our own investors to process fish feeds in Africa should be a priority. And then we should perhaps also encourage those joint ownership, etc. So as we grow Cafi-Ssf, we should reach a point where we should be able to come out with maybe some incentives, if even initially it is something that is an idea, some incentives that we can move forward to seek funding, to see if something good can fall on us. And then finally, we have ended with few topical areas, which we will look at from next quarter going. And for this, the assurance I want to give you is that the Secretariat and the core team will meet on these and then streamline them and then break them down to simple units in a manner that we can all handle them. As soon as that is done, we'll float them on the platform for you to give your opinion on them. So we'll break them into quarters. So on that note, I will thank all of you very much. I know you have a lot of things doing, but you have created time for this. John himself is surprised about the attendance. Next time we will have we will send the invitations very early. and even ask you to invite others to join. Even within one institutions, many as are interested who wants to build knowledge in this area can be invited to join. So on that note, thank you very much. We wish you well. Very soon you will hear from us. And as we have celebrated the IAFA year, we are now the catalyst, as I said in my opening remarks. We are the catalysts, and we are going to move this agenda forward. There is this issue I must clarify before closing, and that was whether it is Kenya SSF or Africa SSF. I think that Kenya is now solid. We are moving towards Africa. So let's assume that we have the Africa mentality, but we haven't launched it. As we go through the quarterly programs, by the end of next year, we will launch the Africa Cafi-Ssf, which will be all embracing. And at that point, we believe that we will have strong representatives in all the regions in Africa. Thank you very much. Over to you, John, if there is anything to say before closing.
Yeah, I think you've said it all, Thomas. So thank you again. Maybe just a quick reminder for our members about the upcoming programs. The program in South Africa, registrations are still ongoing, but about to close. And then the 7th World Congress. For those who are interested, please, you can drop me a note. I think we'll now put all of you in the chat. Those who have my email, I'll probably share my email. So that, you know, if you're interested in joining or coming to Mexico, please feel free to reach out. We have the registration forms and all the other necessary documents to support you. Otherwise, apart from that, I think we can call it a day. And thank you so much for joining and your active participation. Great. So see you on the chat.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
We should meet in Mexico.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, Jesse.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Alice, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good. Bye-bye, Martin.